We spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on NATO, hundreds of protecting them. And we would have always been there for them, but now based on their actions, I guess we don't have to be, do we?
Trump is upset with his European allies for not helping out with the conflict in Iran, and he has been threatening to pull out of the North Atlantic Military Alliance, Nato. He has since announced that he would pull around 5,000 American troops out of Germany over the next 6 to 12 months.
US President Donald Trump's threat came days after German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said Washington had been humiliated by Iran and lacked a coherent strategy. Earlier, Trump had also floated the idea of cutting US troop numbers in Italy and Spain.
Look, why shouldn't I? Italy has not been of any help to us, and Spain has been horrible, absolutely horrible.
Germany, Italy, and Spain host over 52,000 US troops. Most are in Germany. The country is the US Air Force's main logistical hub in Europe. The headquarters of the US European Command and US Africa Command are also based there. US troops were originally stationed in Europe after World War II to prevent Soviet expansion and provide security. Today, many European countries still rely on their presence to protect against possible aggression from Russia. But Trump's recent threats have made them realize they can no longer count on the US. Could China benefit?
This tension is mainly the tension between the US and its European allies, and it's not created by China, right? That's mainly the result of Trump's own aligned policies, right? And particularly his American first approach. But this does not mean Europe will suddenly become pro-China. So that's for sure. So Europe still has its own concerns about China, especially on trade, industrial policy, and market access.
The Honorable Donald John Trump.
Since returning to the White House in January 2025, Trump has heavily pushed his America First agenda. Even before taking office, he ruffled NATO's feathers by repeatedly floating the idea of seizing Greenland. NATO allies saw that as a direct assault on Danish sovereignty. After a tense meeting with NATO's Mark Rutte in Davos in early 2026, Trump's rhetoric shifted from annexation to expanded control. But the rift between the US and other NATO countries has become impossible to ignore, and it's something that China is also watching carefully.
I think for China, NATO is still military blocs that China is not in favor of it. A few years ago, even NATO is talking about trying to move on to Asia, right? So that's a big threat to China. But China doesn't preclude the chance to have a direct dialogue with NATO as it happened recently. But I think what China concerned the most is really security environment in its neighborhood, particularly in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, now even in the Korean Peninsula. So I think China concerned this more than anything else. Without the stabilities in this region, I think China cannot have its own diplomatic and economic agendas. So I think China would feel relieved because the shift right now for the US is in Europe, is in Middle East, is in Latin America, is anywhere but Indo-Pacific. China hopes that we can continue. That's not the benefit for China itself, it's also a benefit for its neighboring country.
Trump is also pressing European allies over Russia's war in Ukraine. The US president has so far not sought new congressional funding for the country. Instead, he has introduced a system where the US provides the technology, such as Patriot missiles, but Europe, he says, must pay the bill.
The message from the White House is clear. Europe must arm itself and take the lead in helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia.
Tensions further escalated when European countries refused to join the US and Israel's war on Iran or allow their bases to be launch points for attacks. Their response infuriated Trump, so much that he threatened to quit NATO entirely, leaving the 77-year-old alliance on the brink of collapse.
The US military campaign in Iran has become a major wedge between Washington and its allies. Allies like Spain and the UK have expressed uneasiness over the lack of a clear exit strategy and the impact on global energy prices.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez asked China to play a larger role in global peace brokering when he visited Beijing in April 2026, in what observers said was a direct snub to US leadership.
The recent visit from Iran's foreign minister to Beijing just before the Xi-Trump meeting further underscores the expectations that China can be a peace broker.
I think the Chinese leadership felt the world is already working to a very uncertain stage. And what China can provide is predictabilities and stabilities.
China does not only stand to gain from Trump's rift with traditional US allies on the diplomatic front. Economically, Trump has also created tension with many countries by threatening reciprocal tariffs on nearly everything.
If the US closes its doors, China is making sure its own doors are open. China is leveraging its dominance in rare earth and EV supply chains and solar.
China is positioning itself as an alternative to the US for Europe. But it may not be that simple.
The EU and China maintain a very large trade volume, right? And China has maintained a trade surplus with Europe so far. Europe is not very happy about that. I think the major problem for China and EU is still economic at this point.
The European Union is increasingly wary about China's economic advantages and industrial overcapacity. The EU's new Industrial Accelerator Act is seen as directly targeting China's dominance in EV batteries and solar components. Beijing has warned the EU to remove these discriminatory provisions and vowed to retaliate if Chinese interests are hurt. Another area where China can benefit from Trump's actions is climate change.
Some European leaders have traveled to Beijing this year, seeking closer ties to hedge against Washington and fill the vacuum left by its retreat on issues such as climate change. The US's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accords and UN climate bodies in early 2026 disrupted the global climate leadership. Countries are turning to Beijing to fill the vacuum. The UK established the UK-China Climate and Nature Partnership in January, while Finland signed a memorandum of understanding with China to expand cooperation in clean energy and technology. Beyond climate, the US's exit from the World Health Organization and the World Food Program have also positioned China to take a larger role in global health and food security, particularly for the global south. China's strategy has never been about outright replacing the US as the global hegemon. Rather, Beijing has framed itself as a multilateral anchor. It actually leveraged the growing frustration of allies with US-American first policies, urging them to define their own interests instead of aligning with Washington on every matter. Instead, China envisions a multipolar world order where middle powers forge fluid coalitions to hedge against the uncertainties of US foreign policy. As the US alienates allies, China leverages the space created to deepen ties while advancing its goal of reshaping the global order.
Good news is that China and the US bilateral relations is very stable so far under President Trump, and it has its own merits because the world is quite turbulent at this point. So I think a stable China-US relations is very important, not only for these two countries, but for all of us. But if they're coming to China, obviously Beijing will be welcome to them. But that will be the discussion of the issue for our concerns, right? So I think China wants to leave out this US factor in these bilateral relations. But it creates this image to the world that the friction among the US allies actually benefited China. But that's not China's initial design. It's not its own intentions. That can be the result, more or less. I think the Chinese leadership already spoke more than a decade ago about this great change unseen in a century. So I think if you look back today, this judgment was quite forward-looking. So the international system is indeed entering a period of major uncertainty and adjustment, particularly the Chinese. I think we are preparing for this long struggle and the long fight.
But observers point out that many traditional allies remain on the same side as the US on major issues. At the same time, Trump's threats often fail to materialize, such as during his first term when he said that he would pull 12,000 troops out of Germany.
China's profit isn't just some base closure in Europe or a trade deal. It's the slow, steady dismantling of the US-led post-World War II order. This situation is actually relatively favorable for China because everyone now recognizes the necessity of de-risking from the US.